Welcome to JCATS, a program that seeks to introduce Japanese contextualized literature and ideas for use by missionaries and anyone that seeks to share the gospel with Japanese people.
日本人から聞く日本のキリスト教。
All right, welcome back to JCats. Today I'm here with Morgen Hildebrand, who has an interesting story because since I've been a missionary in Japan, I haven't heard her situation almost ever. So what's special about Morgen? Well, what's special about Morgen that we're going to talk about today is that Morgen, as a missionary, studied at a Japanese theology school, Tokyo Christian University. So Morgen, if you could maybe just start with sharing a little bit about yourself and how that came about.
Yeah, so I am originally from Kansas in the US, and around 6 years ago, I joined OMF in Japan as what's called an associate missionary. So it's anything up to 3 years. At the time, I was praying about longer term missions in Japan, but I thought, yeah, there's a lot of challenges. Japanese as a language looks really difficult. I don't know if I'm ever going to feel comfortable speaking, communicating, much less be able to do anything useful here. So I kind of did 3 years working with a church plant in North Japan and studying the Japanese language to sort of discern, is this where God's leading me long term? And after that 3 years, was just in love with the people and the place, saw the need for, especially for church planting missionaries here in Japan. And I had spent those 3 years putting a lot of effort and energy into Japanese studies, was able to make a lot of progress. So I went to OMF and I said, I want to join as a long-term member. And they, as an organization, have a policy, which is good, especially in Japan, that if you're going to go long-term, you have to have at least 2 years of theology training and Bible training. Most missionaries will, in my situation, they would kind of take a pause, maybe leave their organization once, go back to their home country, do some more training at a Bible school there, and then come back. But as I was thinking and praying about it, I thought, I've worked really hard to get to where I am in Japanese. If I leave now, if I go back and I do a full-time study program in English, I'm going to forget a lot of that. But also, if I study theology, if I study the Bible in English in a Western context, it's going to be different when I come back here to Japan, doing church planting and doing evangelism. It's not just that the language is different, but the way that people think and process spiritual things is a bit different. So I thought it would be really cool if I could study the Bible in Japanese, if I could study like pastoral care and evangelism from Japanese pastors and evangelists, people that have been here that know what the context is like. It'd be cool if I could study like Japanese church history and even other kind of religious influences and things that are here, like Buddhism and Shintoism. So I talked to some Japanese Christian friends of mine, and they said, hey, there's this Bible college outside of Tokyo called Tokyo Christian University. You should check it out. You should go and look. So I did, and then talked to the OMF leadership, talked to my sending church, my supporting church in the US. And they said, yeah, like if this is what you think you want to do, we're willing to keep supporting you as a missionary to do that. Part of the program is an internship at a local church. They're like, you're still going to be serving the church here? Yeah, it seems good. So that's kind of how that door opened.
That's awesome. So you had to go through an application process to TCU. Did you immediately settle on TCU, or were there other schools that you thought about? Did you have to did you have to do JLPT or anything like that? How did that look?
Yeah, so I did receive a couple other recommendations. The only schools I ended up visiting were HBI, Hokkaido Bible Institute in Sapporo, and then I visited TCU. I think I was pretty sure from the start that I was most interested in TCU, just because they're not only a seminary, they're a nationally accredited a nationally accredited university as well. So you can graduate from there with a bachelor's, but also there's other like the Japanese students are not all going into pastoral ministry. I would say around half of them are hoping to do full-time ministry, but around half of them are just there to get a better base in their theology, their knowledge of the Bible, but they're planning to go out into society and just work as businessmen, as social workers, whatever that may be. And I think I really wanted that community and that network, and to not just have sort of a, I don't know if this is a bad way to say it, but not just a seminary bubble, but be kind of in the Japanese Christian community as a whole. And then in speaking with TCU about kind of what it would look like for me as a non-native Japanese speaker to study there, they recommended that you can apply with JLPT N2 level Japanese, which I had at the time that I went to visit the school. They said if you have N2, they have a like school-specific language proficiency exam that you can take to kind of prove, yeah, you can follow a class or whatever. And so I did take that. I found it more challenging than N2, sure, in all honesty, but they did, after kind of looking at that specific Japanese exam that I took, they recommended, they said you should try and take N1 before you come in. Like if you can't, that's okay, but it'll help with your understanding of kanji and things that you're going to have to do for like reading assignments. So at the time I visited the school, it was about a year before I was thinking of entering it. So I spent the next year kind of working and was able to take N1. Yeah, and then applied. I've sat through the same like entrance examination process that any like Japanese student would. So it involves, submitting. I graduated from a university in the US, so you submit your like credits and you can transfer those in. You fill in why you want to join TCU. You write a short essay saying what your vision for future ministry is, and then on the day of like the examination, you have to write an essay on the spot. And so they give you 4 topics in advance, but you don't know which one is going to come out on the day of. And so you kind of like research about these different things and have to write like a 1-page essay. So what I did was I took the 4 topics, and in the like month before the examination, I wrote like a mini essay in Japanese on each of those, and I memorized it so I'd be able to write the kanji.
Wow. Oh yeah, because you're writing kanji by hand.
Yeah.
It's not like a
so I'd say that was like the most challenging part. Yeah. But they're very like, I mean, the process is pretty gracious. One thing I don't know if this is giving a cheat code or not, but if anyone is thinking of entering TCU, one thing I failed on is there's also an interview, and they ask you the like the value statement of the school, and apparently they ask everyone, but I had no idea that I should like look at that in advance and memorize that. So
okay, I am writing that down.
I couldn't answer their question, but they still let me in. So
that's good. I'm curious, how did you prepare yourself for all of the writing in Japanese? I mean, we hear a lot and sometimes we read, but I feel like the output is a lot less practiced for most missionaries.
Yeah. So I think that was another reason why I wanted to do the program, because I felt like in church planting, I'd used a lot of spoken Japanese, and I mean, obviously was not perfect in it, but I just didn't have a lot of opportunities to hone my like writing or I guess formal speaking skills. So I knew it was going to be a challenge. What I did at first, especially like preparing for the entrance examination, knowing I'm going to have to write a short essay, is I used some textbooks that a former Japanese teacher had recommended that are meant for like international students. So I think it's like 留学生のための文章の書き方とか, like they're for like writing Japanese essays for exchange students. So I used a couple of those, bought them off of Amazon. it just kind of explained like the structure that most academic settings are looking for when you're writing an essay. Pretty similar to, I think, what we have in the US. You know, you introduce the topic, you give your supporting points, and then you conclude. And
Yeah.
gave some examples of like phrases that are used in written academic Japanese, phrases that are not used in written academic Japanese. So I used some of that, and then I did have a former Japanese teacher just kind of look over what I'd written and let me know if there was anything major. So I practiced that for the entrance, but when I got in, I found actually, in some ways, after entering the school, it was a bit easier because well, first of all, you don't have to write it by hand. You can use your computer, and that's a lot easier.
Sure.
A lot of my professors were pretty flexible as far as using AI to check your language was okay. Like as long as you're not writing the thing with AI, like if you want to check the grammar or something, they were quite willing to work with you on that. My longer exams, like usually during the semester, short like reflection essays or like short essays, I would write in Japanese. The final exams, because they would be longer papers and on deeper topics. If my professor understood Japan or understood English, then I would ask permission to write it in English, and most of them said that's fine.
Oh well.
So a lot of the professors have done their graduate work overseas, and so if I was writing, you know, like I was writing a 6-page paper on Wesley's position on the Anglican Church, then I wasn't going to write that in Japanese.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, that would be hard to write in Japanese. Man, I even just anecdotally, I was trying to do something about Irenaeus for the Easter Sunday, and I'm on the AI. How do Japanese people pronounce Irenaeus? You know, or what is the Japanese word for recapitulation?
Yes,
that kind of thing is like. And 5 years ago, I would not have known how to do it, you know, without AI, right? Like, I mean, I remember doing something similar with a different not founding father, that's America, a different church father.
Yes.
I don't know how to type Augustine in Japanese, you know, or whatever, but that's cool that they let you do that. Okay, so you mentioned that by studying, and this may have been before we hit record, by studying at a Japanese school, you're able to get more of a contextual perspective. You mentioned stuff like pastoral care or evangelism, or, you know, I'm curious if anything, when you were taking classes, if anything like stuck out to you contextually, like, oh my goodness, I had never thought of this, or I would never think of this if I hadn't been taught it in this setting, you know. Were there some things like that
yeah, there were definitely, I think, quite a few things. One that stands out in particular, one of my professors, his name is Professor Shohei Yamato, and he was a pastor here in Japan for many, many years, but he himself grew up in a Buddhist family. He says he was tricked by a friend in high school into going to an English class at a church, and through that became a believer. His family, some of them eventually became believers, but because he grew up in a very like devout, Pure Land Buddhist Japanese household, his grandmother was very devout in her faith in that. He kind of understood both worlds, and he ended up deciding he wanted to become a pastor, went to seminary. But one of his professors there said, you know, you have this interest as well in learning more about kind of your roots and about Buddhism. Why don't you keep studying that more? So after he became a pastor, he actually did some graduate studies at a Buddhist university for people that are going to be monks here in Japan. So he was like pastoring a church at the same time as he's like taking classes along with these monks to be. So that's his specialty. He pastored in Kyoto, which is a good place to be doing all of that. But he taught a class at TCU on Pure Land Buddhism, which is a branch that kind of came out. Testing my memory here, but around the Kamakura era in Japan. And so the like two, I guess, monks, or the two kind of teachers, main teachers in Pure Land Buddhism, are Honen and Shinran.
Okay.
And they were influenced by a Buddhist monk who had kind of studied in China and then had come back to Japan. And so they've got this form of like very unique Japanese Buddhism that they teach, where basically the Amida Buddha, who was like, who's a myth and everyone acknowledges as a myth, it's a mythological figure, was this man that suddenly realized like no matter how hard people try, they can't really be good. And so he made it his goal to like help people basically be saved, to transcend, to reach, like, to become Buddha.
Yeah.
So he made it his goal to help them, right? So he became a Buddha, and then the idea is basically it's salvation by grace alone through faith alone. That you can't, no matter how hard you work, you're not going to like make it to Buddha. So you just have to, with a whole heart, believe that Buddha will help you, and then his grace alone will save you, basically. And like in Japanese, we read like a modern version of the writings of Shinran. And I was like reading the Apostle Paul, like, he's like saying the same things. And so my professor, Professor Yamato, he would have us like read a chapter together as a class and then sit and discuss. And he was like, okay, I want you to like note what is like similar to like the theology of Romans, but then I want you to find what's the difference, like where's the key differences. And there would be times where we'd be sitting there in the discussion group, like, I don't really know I can't find the difference. And he said, you guys, this is important for you that are going to do ministry or evangelism here, because it's easy for missionaries to kind of casually sort of go and be like, yeah, Christianity is so different from Buddhism. What you've got in Buddhism is so wrong. Sharing the gospel with somebody, and they're like, yeah, that's what I already believe. Like, why? Why are you saying I'm wrong? And so it was just really eye-opening. But in the end, through that class, I think what we all came to realize was, even if the theology looks very similar, even if it's by faith alone, or through faith by grace alone, in the end, like it's the person you're believing in, because everyone in Pure Land Buddhism acknowledges that the main Buddha is a myth, that he never existed. It's just a concept. And so you're sort of like, it's a spiritual concept that has been imagined by spiritual thinkers, and all the scholars will acknowledge that. But then what we're proclaiming is Christ, a historical figure, and a resurrection, a historical fact. And so it really does come down to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I read somewhere that maybe it was when Francis Xavier landed in Japan to I don't want to, what am I trying to say? Catholicize is the wrong word, but to evangelize Japan from the Catholic Church, that he remarked that they originally thought that the Protestants got there first because they ran into Pure Land Buddhism, and they thought this, I think the quote was like, this reeks of the Protestant heresy or something like that.
Yes.
From Xavier's perspective, which was so interesting. And I mean, I guess there's ways to address that, like you said, like that could be an entry point evangelically with people that have that background.
Yeah.
But that's cool that you had the professor with that much, background in that stuff. So yeah. What was your favorite thing to study while you were and if it was Pure Land Buddhism, then what was your second favorite thing to study?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I think I had favorite professors. I know you're maybe not supposed to,
That's
but
okay. They're not like kids.
yeah, my historical theology professor, so talking about like theology and church history and how they have impacted each other from the time of the early church until now. He was just a really interesting, kind of quirky Japanese gentleman. He wanted to go into he was saved as an adult, wanted to go into pastoral ministry. And people around him were like, I don't know if you're cut out for pastoral ministry. And he was like, well, maybe I want to like become a theologian, like a theology scholar. And they were like, yeah, you should do that. So
Not people.
So he went into theology and did an academia and studied, and he goes, but I still, my dream is still to be a pastor. And so he goes, I consider myself a pastoral professor. And he was really right about that. Like he was very quirky and he'd kind of be all over the map, but all of his classes were like, we might be studying the Nicene Creed, but then he would just bring it back into like how Christ has to be at the center of our lives and how humility has to drive us in our interactions with other believers, and how, when genuine believers don't see eye to eye on something, the answer is not one side wins, but the answer is there has to be a bigger reality that includes both positions, or like that includes all of the church as a whole, right? And so he was saying like you have to be willing to like look at your brothers and sisters as brothers and sisters, and keep talking through it and keep working through it until you come to a deeper truth, right? He's like, if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have the creeds. And yeah, I think just seeing that in a context here in Japan where the church is pretty small, there are like all the different denominations, but I feel like if you don't know how to work together, not even just as the church in Japan, but as missions organizations, as missionaries working with the church in Japan, if you can't have the humility to kind of partner in that together, then it's going to be really hard, I guess, from here on out. So I think that was a class that I really enjoyed. And then also my like teaching practicums, where we'd be assigned like a message on a particular topic or a particular passage. And then the professor and then a few other students would kind of give constructive criticism and talk about it. And I think like, I think as a missionary, until entering TCU, not that this is a bad thing, but most, I think, missionaries and church planting missionaries as well, the goal is to say something, right? And if you can be kind of giving some sort of evangelistic message, some sort of Bible message in understandable Japanese, then that's good. And that is a good thing. But I think this, like being at TCU and being critiqued along with native speakers as to like, oh, if you say it this way, or if you arrange your ideas in this way, it's going to come across better. I think that was really helpful to get that kind of feedback. And I guess to not just have my Japanese corrected, but to have like the way of communicating corrected, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
The feel of the Christian community here seems to have a much better, to me, biblical grasp of church unity than I feel like with the individualism in the States. It's easier to defer to that, individualistic spirit as opposed to the church unity spirit. So I was glad to hear you say that, because that's something that comes out when you're in the Japanese context.
Yes.
Yeah. And then what do you say? Oh, I wrote down the practicum stuff. Say something. Like when you say something, do you mean we feel like we have to comment on everything? We have to be teaching on everything, but
yeah, I mean, I think at first it's just a challenge of like stringing a sentence together, right?
Oh yeah.
And when you're just starting out. And so I think one of the strengths of missionaries, and this isn't just my opinion. I remember talking to a Japanese believer. She said, I love to hear missionaries preach because they just say everything so like bluntly, basically. Jesus is God. He came to earth. He died because we're sinful.
Yeah.
Believe him, you're saved. Like there's not a lot of like, you can't beat around the bush. You don't have the grammatical prowess to beat around the bush.
It's
right?
like a TLDR of the
yes.
too long didn't read. Huh?
Yes. And we all came, with we want to share the gospel. This is the central message we want to share. We don't really want to beat around the bush. So that's good. But I feel like as a communicator, I don't think you can ever stop honing your communication style. And especially Yeah, especially like I think something that was really impactful for me in my pastoral care class, the professor had us write a pastoral sermon or like a pastoral message. And basically what he meant was like he assigned us all the same passage, but he said, I want you to think about one person that you are like pastorally caring for, whether that's a member in your church or it could be a non-believer, somebody that you're like trying to share the gospel with, like whoever that is. I want you to pray about them and think about them. And as you read the passage, think about what in this passage is going to speak to them, and then write your message almost with that person in mind. I mean, obviously he was like, you're going to do the other thing, you're going to do like the exegesis and hermeneutics and everything, but like think about this person and put in your message phrases that are going to like help them realize like, oh, this is me, like. And so we wrote a message on the Samaritan woman, the woman at the well, and had someone specifically in mind. And yeah, it was just different, like putting phrases in. So for me, as I was like thinking about meditating on what the Samaritan woman must have been feeling, like the challenge was to put that in phrases that a Japanese person would actually think, right? Like an American might, like you might have certain phrases, like you might say like, oh, like what's wrong with me? Why doesn't my life go the way I want it to? So like how would a Japanese person actually say that, right? Like what kind of thoughts or struggles or shames or embarrassments, like how would you phrase that in a way that somebody would feel like, oh, the Bible is like speaking to me. And so I think that was really helpful, right? Because sometimes grammatically, like you can take something that you would think in English and you can translate it into Japanese and people will understand what you mean, but they're not going to think like, yeah, that's what I think all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think just kind of that communication skill was helpful, but then also getting feedback on, because I think there are ways that I do communicate differently. I'm American. I tend to be more direct. When I'm speaking Japanese, I soften it a little bit, but still there were times when I'd get feedback where they'd say like, as a Japanese person, I wouldn't say it that way, but I think it's good that you said it that way. Like it challenged me to think about it from a different perspective. So I think that was like helpful and encouraging.
Yeah, that is, I mean, there must be so many takeaways to obviously studying Christianity in the culture where you're hoping to share Christianity. But that's so exciting. And you completed your studies now. That's correct?
Yes, I graduated last month with a bachelor's in church ministries.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Did you get to wear anything cool to the graduation ceremony?
Yes, I did. I rented a hakama, like
Nice.
kimono and hakama. So that was fun. And my friends. So I had a classmate who became a believer in high school through like a Christian girls' school that she went to. But she's from a family that owns a temple. Like her Buddhist family runs a temple. So she knows how to do like the kimono and like kitsuke, like anything super traditionally Japanese, she's like well versed in because her family grew up with all of that. So she did the like she put the kimono on myself and a few others for the graduation, and we were like, oh, like thank you, because you pay like several $100s to have that done at a store, right? And so we said thank you, and she goes, no, I'm just glad that like God redeemed the stuff that I learned growing up in a temple. Like,
very cool.
so even that was a cool experience.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to ask you about something. When I met you, you were interested in well, I have it here actually. This
Yes.
my camera's all messed up. No, okay. Japanese Understanding of Salvation by Martin Heiswolf. He came and did a seminar for us last August, and you were there. And the reason that you had interest in that is because you were working on like a research paper that you mentioned due to some circumstances, unforeseen circumstances, you weren't able to actually complete. But I'm still interested just in sort of hearing what you were what you were hoping to work on and why that was interesting to you. I don't know how far you got in the process, but if you're able to share any of that, I think it'd be cool to hear.
Yeah, so I was doing for like a graduation project, I was doing a research project on the, like, not average isn't the right word, but like the general Japanese population's understanding of salvation. Because salvation is a pretty like Christianese word,
Sure.
especially in Japanese. The word sukui, like people use it in daily conversation, like even non-Christians, but they use it with a very, to me, what seems like a very different meaning. It'll be like, I was stressed and I was running late for work and I showed up at work all frazzled and my coworker had bought me a coffee and they like saved me. Like sukuwareta. Yeah. Like it's a very almost casual phrase. And I thought, here, like this is like the phrases that missionaries, evangelists love to use. And rightly, we love to use tsumi, which is sin. We love to use sukui, which is salvation. We love to say, if you believe, you will like sukuwareru, or you will be saved. But I was like, but how does this sound to the people that are listening? Like, what is it that they're thinking of? And even if they're thinking of it in like not such a casual, practical way, I was just getting the sense that a lot of Japanese people think of it more as like an emotional piece or like an emotional, a psychological sort of salvation, that like Christianity is great if you are like struggling emotionally or psychologically and you need something to lean on, probably a good option. But I wasn't getting the sense that there was a more, I guess, biblical or eternal meaning in the way that people use the word salvation. So I wanted to kind of study that. And so I was going to use mainly interview questions. I had read some like academic works along with Dr. Heiswolf's and done some research into kind of the background of animism and Buddhism and sort of like the cultural understandings of spirituality in Japan. But then I wanted to just ask like the average 20, 30, 40-year-old. I was going to choose like 10 people and just interview them and ask, without using the word salvation, ask like, what is it that you would consider like the most important thing, right? Like, what is it that if you have this and nothing else, then you're good. I don't have them in front of me, but I did have some questions written up that I was going to ask for interviews. And so I still kind of have it in my back pocket. I would like to continue the research at some point in time. But yeah, I was just trying to figure out, okay, what is it that, not only what is it that the average Japanese person understands by the concept of salvation, but what is that thing that they're seeking, that there's like willing to give their life for, but they might not have even realized that that's what they're after. So like, where is the point where we can connect that with Christ?
Yeah, that's perfect. I wonder, I remember you weren't able to get the answer. Did you have a theory? You know how with the scientific method you start with like I think it might be this, and then you figure it out. Did you have anything based on your studies at the school that you thought might be the answer, or you're just gonna wait and see?
I had some ideas. I think again, what I mentioned, like kind of the psychological like piece, or like in Japanese, people like the word shiawase, happiness.
Yeah.
I think I was kind of expecting maybe some answers to come along those lines. But also, again, because of the Buddhist influence, like Buddhism is a very like, it's not even if it has the faith concept to it, it's still about like becoming a good person, right? And the whole concept of Buddha is that he's a person that was good, and so that then can be an example and can be a help to others, right? And so I think there is sort of an elevation of good, or like model worthy people.
Mhm.
And so I think I was anticipating maybe that would come out too, sort of a not behavioral goodness, but like being a nice person, being a helpful person, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of, I mean, just with this podcast and what led up to that in the first place, just having time during COVID to research
Mm,
stuff. And I was like, man, I wonder if different atonement models,
mm,
like the one that the sort of big one is for us is obviously like penal substitutionary atonement. Christ
mm,
died because we needed our sins to be
mm,
the punishment for our sins to be paid by someone. It's
mm,
kind of the sort of Reformation. I mean, it I think it goes back further than that, but
mm,
apparently that's why we like it so much. We Western Protestants like it so much.
mm,
But then like asking people, like this last week, I asked a church member, I'm
mm,
preaching next Sunday on Easter. Why are you a Christian? What is it about Christianity that makes you want to be a Christian?
mm,
And I think she said, the sort of aspect of that I'm a new person because of
mm,
Jesus. And yes, I was like, okay, well, let's go back to that.
mm,
Let's look at some older model. But so I always wonder, are older models going to grab people's attention quicker,
mm,
or is there a Japanese model? I mean, do we need something that's more specifically,
mm,
Japanese, or just one of the models that exists already and it's just contextual? I don't know the answer, but
mm.
it's always fun to kind of think through that stuff to me.
Yeah. Something I realized too through being at TCU and I mean I could be wrong in my perception in this, but I think even the Japanese Christian world struggles with contextualization, because actually, so I went from being like church planting missionary in Aomori, where like half of the Sunday service was non-believers or like very new believers, to studying theology at a school, right? So I think after 3 years of learning Japanese and learning how to communicate spiritual concepts in very like basic everyday Japanese, then I went to this like theology school with people that have grown up in the church or that are pastors' kids or whatever. And I didn't understand what people were saying. I was like, what are you talking about? Because
Mm.
there is a lot of Christianese in Japanese
Uh-huh.
as well. And and in talking with them, like they have a heart to share their faith, they have a heart for evangelism. But I think some of them also struggle with, they're like, sometimes I don't know how to explain these terms or these concepts in a way that's easy to understand. And I think that was encouraging for me. I was like, oh, well, we're in the same boat. Like we might be coming at it from different angles, but yeah, we're all learning how to better communicate, and how to connect with people where they are. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you're exactly right on that. That especially people who grew up in the church or maybe were closely tied to either older missionaries or something like that tend to maybe be closer with some of
Mm,
those not yet contextualized concepts and things. So
mm,
that's interesting, the difference between a new Christian and then someone that grew up in the church and just the way that they speak about Christianity.
yes.
Yeah, any concluding thoughts, or you wanna recommend that everybody go study? I mean, obviously, I think it was super cool that you were able to do that, and that's not
Mm,
something so many maybe people come and they got two little kids and this and that.
yeah.
And I imagine you were actually in Chiba studying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but
I will say TCU has you can get a degree there in an English. Like you can take
oh.
theology classes in English. There is an English track. Um, it has like basic theology major. So the major I wanted was like church ministry, and I wanted to do like the teaching practicums and things. And so that's why I opted to do it in Japanese. But you can get a degree fully in English. If you do that, you are required to take a certain level of Japanese classes as well, like Japanese language classes. So I had friends there that they wanted, they were from somewhere overseas, but they wanted to do missions in Japan long term. And so that was their first step because, they could get a student visa to be here. They could do an internship at a local church, maybe an international church, so they could kind of have both or bilingual experience. And then they were taking their theology classes in English, some of which are still taught by Japanese professors. But then they were also taking Japanese language classes. So that is one track. There was even a family with a young kid because TCU has family housing. They have like a family dorm as well. So there are a lot of options. And then as well, I had a friend who she had into, and she's from Germany originally, but she entered to the Japanese track. But because she was a theology major, just general theology, she had much more freedom in what classes she took. So she ended up taking both classes in the Japanese track and in the English track. And so kind of mixed and matched. And yeah, so there's a few options. They have a few classes that they offer online as well. It has many good options for kind of whatever stage you're in. But I think also my perspective is like, if you want to study, not just in context, but if you want to support a Japanese seminary, which I think many of us do, like rather than sending our money to a place that frankly, I think American seminaries probably aren't struggling quite as much.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
You can think of it as supporting the work in that way.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, they say that it's not the best time for schools in America, but I'm sure that's going to be multiplied when you have such a small church in Japan. But yeah. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate hearing from you and a lot of your experiences. Encourage me, and I think they're going to probably encourage a lot of people. So thanks. And all right, I'll hope to see you again at some point.
Yes, definitely.
And until then, take care.
Thank you.